Have you wondered how the district attorney's office has been operating with COVID-19 impacting the court system here in San Bernardino County? Maybe you've wanted to know more information about something called zero bail or the zero bail order. We'll answer those questions and many more with Jason Anderson, the district attorney of San Bernardino County. If you're watching this on our Facebook page live or you're watching the replay, do us a favor and hit that share button and place this on your page or newsfeed and share it with any groups you feel would benefit from this information. For our viewers on YouTube, make sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon so you'll be notified whenever we're live or have new content on our page. If you have a question for us, please place it in the comments field and we'll get to them towards the end of the show or as time permits. I'm Mike Byers, the Public Affairs Officer for the District Attorney's Office, and thank you for your support here on Facebook and all of our social media platforms. Let's get started. Good evening, sir.
Hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm doing good. A little awkward not being in the office, but this is the way we do it during COVID, right?
Yeah, thank goodness for the medium that we have, and really appreciate you setting this up, and for people to be able to get involved and ask questions and give them some up-to-date information. I think it's always important to come from a local level as fresh and as clean as we can give it.
Yeah, absolutely. So the question is, I know you've been making the rounds on some of the Facebook Lives, and there's, we obviously have posted information on our social media platforms about zero bail. But for those that may not know, please explain to us, what is the zero bail order?
To give the proper perspective, we have to understand what the traditional bail schedule means. In every county in California, there is a bail schedule that is determined by all of the judges in the county, based upon the severity of a crime and the likelihood that somebody either is going to cause harm to the public or not come back to court. There's a certain amount of bail that's set. Obviously, the more serious the case or the indication that people are trying to flee, the higher the bail is going to be, and that's what it's set at. On April the 6th, the Judicial Council of California, as a response to the virus, said that on certain crimes, bail was going to be set at zero. And so the presumptive bail was going to be at zero. We had 7 days to implement this. And locally, at the time, we had about 6,100 inmates in custody. And so it was going to be a tremendous amount of determination in terms of who may qualify for that zero bail. And beyond that, looking at what they established was what were the criteria and would it harm public safety in San Bernardino County? And so we had to go through that to understand there were certain crimes under the zero bail schedule that were automatically accepted from the zero bail. In other words, it operated like the zero bail schedule never came down, and it was the same as what we knew before the zero bail schedule. So there were 13 crimes that said zero bail doesn't apply to these, but for everything else, zero bail did apply. And so we started to work through what that meant. We started to look at some of the crimes that were not included, and specifically misdemeanor and felony child abuse, misdemeanor and felony elder abuse. Were not included in that, and there were certain sex crimes that were not included in that that gave us a very big concern about what this may mean in terms of the impact of inmates getting released that may be committing more serious crimes than were contemplated initially with the zero bail schedule, that we needed to find a way, hey, can we identify these cases? Can we make the proper objections? Can we preserve public safety in spite of some of the measures that the emergency bail came down at as a response to the virus?
Okay. All right. When you were first notified about the order, what were your first thoughts? And did you think about, hey, how is this going to impact our office, our day-to-day operations, as well as, we have an oath all of us have taken to the people of San Bernardino County. And, did you immediately start thinking, oh, wow, how are we going to address this one?
Yeah, the first concern that we had was that the zero bail schedule did not take into account people who had prior serious or violent felony convictions. I will tell you that the zero bail order specifically excluded new crimes that were serious or violent felonies, which we all know are strikes, but it didn't contemplate people who had prior strikes who picked up a new felony. Their bail was supposed to be set at zero. And so we knew that based upon criminal record, that those individuals were going to pose a higher or the highest risk to the public. And so we thought, how do we identify of the 6,200 people in custody who are not excluded, how are we going to identify to be able to make an argument that these folks should stay in custody and not risk the public safety of our residents? And so that was the first big concern that we had. Secondly, people have to realize that since March 16th, as in most businesses, we have had 80% of our workforce at home telecommuting to stay healthy. And so when you're dealing normally with an operation that has over 560 people, and you take 80% of those people and get them home in telecommuting, obviously this new wrinkle of having to deal with all of these cases that could qualify for zero bail, we needed to be able to get more personnel back into the office. And so that creates an issue too, because you have to walk that fine line of balancing public safety, not risking your own employees' health, but staying true to our mission in the DA's office of protecting the public. And so those were the two main things that we really had to worry about. Fortunately, with our workforce, we had significant people who volunteered to come back in and to start looking at these cases to give a response, because we only had a week to determine between the zero bail schedule and what was actually going to be imposed. We only had 7 days to be able to wrap our hands around potentially 6,200 cases that we had to worry about. So that was our big concern, was how quickly we had to work through the number of cases. And really, you couldn't just do it based on the charges. You actually had to look back into the files that we've had, criminal records, in some instances, the facts of the case. So it was a very big lift, but we were able to pull it off. And I will say too, Mike, that in the midst of all this, we were having discussions with the judges in San Bernardino County, saying, does this automatically mean that if they're not on the 13 accepted crimes, that everybody gets zero bail? And I can tell you, initially, that was the feeling. But I will tell you that we had significant conversations with every discipline in the criminal justice system in the county, the judges, the defense bar, law enforcement, and the DA's office. And we actually worked out to where we realized it didn't necessarily mean that. So we were able to start having some hearings and ensuring that a judge would make a determination and that we would be able to argue on behalf of our citizens to keep them safe.
Yeah. And I think something that's really important for people to know is that, the people that are in custody, those crimes that they're in custody for, there's already provisions in the law that say, hey, your crimes are serious enough that you need to be in custody and go through trial. And so that we've seen a lot of arguments with people that have said, let people out, that they want people to be released. But the people that aren't really, I don't want to say a threat, because every criminal is a threat to our safety, whether it be property or personal. But those that have low grade crimes, they're already out. They've already been issued a citation and released out in the field with the law enforcement officer. So, which leads me on to this issue. And I know you and I, we've talked in depth in the office. There have been some notable cases on the media. I know we've had a couple here in the county, one in particular in the Chino region, where a subject multiple times had been arrested. And I don't really exactly remember the charges, but it made you, when you read the news release, it made you shake your head. And then obviously I know about the one in Glendora that wasn't in our county, but right. Guy, steals 2 cars in a day, pursuit, all that type of thing. When you're seeing that stuff as the district attorney for our county, does that make you a little scared of what could potentially happen?
Yeah, it always does. And I always say this, and the point you make is good. People aren't in custody for no reason, right? Even if it's a pretrial custody, what people have to understand is the Constitution is always going to protect people at the arrest stage. There has to be probable cause in order to arrest someone. If the DA's office determines to file charges, we have to believe that we can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. And so for individuals to remain in custody, there's already been objective standards that have been met that indicate that those people are suitable for custody and they can't make bail. And the zero bail folks, they've already had a judge determine whether they were safe to leave the county or not, because we have a pretrial release system that's been in place for longer than anybody realizes in San Bernardino County through the sheriff's department and through probation. And so what you're really dealing with then a population of people who been arrested for cause, they've been charged with a crime that we can prove beyond a reasonable doubt, and probation and the sheriff has made a determination they're not safe to be released, and yet we have to deal with this zero bail to get yet another review of whether they're going to be released. And so that is what we're up against. I know the Chino case was similar. It dealt with auto theft, repeated auto thefts. Somebody would steal a car, be taken to jail, they get released on zero bail. The next day they steal someone else's car. In Southern California, that's devastating because we all use our cars typically to get to work, to get our kids to school, to deal with childcare, to deal with our daily needs, grocery store. Significant financial hindrance to people if their cars are stolen is horrible in terms of that. The case that we were all at least put on the radar screen was initially in Florida. There was some release of inmates as a result of COVID, and a person got out and committed murder. We don't want that to happen. And you know, the problem is that I tell people all the time that want to argue, hey, well, you need to release all these folks. You're not worried about their health. We are worried about their health. We do not want people to get sick with the virus. And fortunately, our sheriff in the county has managed to be able to quarantine properly, to screen inmates, to treat inmates, to keep the cases of COVID relatively low as it relates to our population in the jail. So we don't hope that somebody gets sick, but we also have to balance that with maintaining public safety. We can do more than one thing at a time. And that's what I always impress upon people is that I don't want people to think that those of us in law enforcement don't care or are hoping that people in custody get sick. We don't want that, right? That is not something that's desirable. But what's even less desirable are innocent people who have made different decisions than people who have committed crimes to be subject to or the potential of additional victimization just because there's a virus in our community. The presence of a virus doesn't make someone either more or less a danger to the public, right? Like for you and I, if we're in the private sector and we're business owners and we lose our job, the virus doesn't make our likelihood of success more or less. We deal with that where we're found. And that's the same way with inmates. And I know that can sound cruel, but we have taken measures to ensure the sheriff and the court system have taken measures to even ensure that inmates aren't exposed to the virus. But that was our big concern, Mike, is that there would be this repetitive crime spree by people who then the message was sent, hey, this new thing is zero bail. There's certain crimes I can go out and commit all night. Next day I'll get released. I'll go out and do it again. Well, there's always somebody on the receiving end of that, right? It's always a single mom or an elderly person or somebody who has to get to work. They're out of leave time. They're out of sick time. And their car's been stolen. What do? Well, you know, I don't want them to pay that price.
Yeah. And I think on one of the videos that we've done recently, I said the same thing. You know, you've got the guy that's got all of his work tools in his truck at 3 a.m, and some guy comes and steals that. And that man now can't do his livelihood to put food on the table. So
yeah, and unfortunately, we did have one case where initially it started out as a lower level assault type crime. And the person, it was in the high desert. The person was given zero bail, and within 5 or 7 days, they committed a more significant, serious felony domestic violence crime against the same victim, who they had victimized 7 days before. And that's a horror story. Fortunately, there were, it was significant injury, but not death. And fortunately, it wasn't. But that's not the right balance. I mean, it just isn't.
Yeah. Okay. Well, a question, along the same lines, a question came in via Instagram this afternoon, and it was what precautions have been done to keep our inmates safe in this
pandemic?
Great
question. That is a great question, and it is something that should always be at the forefront of the concerns. The sheriff's department has always been used to dealing with communicable diseases. We've had chickenpox go through the jail. We've had measles go through the jail. We've had the norovirus, which is very contagious. It's a lower intestinal virus, much akin to food poisoning that has gone around significantly. So the jail has the space and the ability to quarantine people. One of the things that the sheriff's department started to do in early March was they were screening everybody coming into their system, including their own employees. So they were taking their temperatures. They were checking them for the symptoms. If they had the symptoms, they were immediately quarantining the inmates. And they were sending their own staff home, so there wasn't exposure there. So that started very initially. Then they were supplied face coverings. The jail population actually decreased as a result of stay-at-home orders, and so they had a greater space within the jail to actually distance out inmates. From a court standpoint, what we've done is, in addition to providing the face coverings at court, we have gone in the last month to actually a lot of video hearings in court that normally would have to be in person. And the defense bar, the public defender's office, the sheriff's department, and the DA's office all work together to be able to pull this off. Because generally people that go to court have a right to be there in person. But as a result of the risk, we set up actually a video component to where an inmate can stay in their custody setting by themselves, come out of their pod, not be commingled with someone from a different sector in the jail, appear on video with their attorney in a confidential setting initially, because their attorney would come in through iPad at a different location, discuss the case with their client, in this case the inmate, make decisions. If it was going to be a continuance, it was going to be a continuance, but we've also actually been able to do plea bargains through video. And then once the plea bargains are signed, the inmate will go on video in the courthouse on TV, where they can do a split screen. They can see the judge, they can see their attorney, and they can be advised. And what it has done is it has significantly protected the inmate from being moved around onto a room where they're not socially distancing, and more particularly on a bus where they certainly wouldn't be socially distancing. And I can tell you, Mike, that was done through the efforts of all those disciplines that I talked about, primarily for the inmates' sake, because we want them to be safe, but we also realize there's a great risk if they come into the courtrooms that then there's exposure either by us who are asymptomatic perhaps to an inmate, or they're asymptomatic and then they have contact with their attorney, the judicial staff, the bailiff, and the prosecutors. And so we really reduce that vectoring as a result of video. So that's probably the best mechanism through technology that I've seen that's made it safe not only for the inmates, but for everybody involved daily in the judicial process.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important points to make about that plan that you and the executive staff implemented is the fact that, yes, although our job is to prosecute and hold accountable people that do something wrong, your first thought is, hey, we have to guarantee the constitutional rights of people that are in custody. So in a way, so it kind of counters anybody's argument that says, we're violating people's rights, we don't care about the inmates, whatever it is, or you're guilty until proven innocent. You're countering that argument. So that was a great move.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I want to say that it is a result of really significant people in our office, particularly our Bureau of Information Technology and the defense bar, the public defender's office, and the courts all coming together technologically to be able to pull this off and run a test and be able to. I mean, you're talking about limiting on any given day maybe 40 to 50 people who otherwise would have to come over to court. They're staying in the jail, and if you do the math on that, like compound interest, every day, every 4 days, that adds up to 160 people. For 4 weeks, that's significant. So it is that's obviously health is a human right. It's a personal right, and we have to keep that in mind. But I always want to say that is one consideration. That's not the only consideration, because if that's the only consideration, and if somebody gets out and commits another crime and impacts a victim, well, then who's to stand up for that victim's human right to not be a victim and for their health and safety to be protected? We think that's us. And so we think we've struck the right balance. Yeah, exactly. Now, I've got some questions coming in. I'm going to put this one up. This is a great question from Nadine Binion. Hopefully I pronounced that right. And she says, I have a question. What are you guys doing to combat the unlawful order to let inmates out on the $0 bail? Uses some language, colorful language. It says, that's okay. Yeah, bull crap. And we will not get used to this. This is not right. And I love her emphasis on this. And I see so many people that are just as passionate about it. Yeah. So what are we doing to combat it? Is there anything? We were fortunate to be able to convince the courts, and the courts worked with us to say, even though the zero bail is an emergency order, it's only a presumptive amount. Bail is always discretionary and always presumptive. You can always deviate from any given bail amount. Even if bail is set at $100,000 on a particular crime, we're always free to go into court and argue that it should be higher. And the defense bar is always free to go into court and argue that it should be lower. And those arguments happen every day. Right. So what we're doing with zero bail is we're saying the same thing. We're saying this is only a presumptive, it's discretionary, and we believe that bail ought to be set at this amount and not the zero bail amount. And I can tell you that we've had very good success in arguing that, particularly in instances where people have prior serious or violent felonies on their convictions, or on their rap sheets, or the instances where we've seen a lot where somebody steals a car, the police go to arrest them, they turn on the lights and sirens, and the person flees 100 miles an hour down the freeway for miles and miles, jeopardizing people's lives. Those crimes weren't included in terms of the exceptions under the bail schedule, or the zero bail schedule, and it was really, really disappointing. The judges in San Bernardino County have allowed us to argue those folks are not getting out on zero bail, and we're happy to do it. So for Nadine, I would tell her that what we're doing to combat it is we're being given the opportunity to go into court to make our case, to argue why we should deviate from the zero amount, and the amount should go higher based upon public safety. And we've had some success on doing that. But that's a great question, because if you look at it in the abstract, you think zero bail is it's set, and there's nothing we can do. We've been able to combat that. So it's a great question.
Yeah, and that leads us to Ashley Thomas, who's watching us live, and she says, "How long will the zero bail order last? Will it last as long as the stay-at-home orders are in effect, or is it going to last until the virus has passed?"
Good question. The presumption and the way the emergency orders currently read is that they can last up to 90 days after the emergency orders are lifted. And so it can go on even if we get to the point where we feel as if we've overcome the virus and the measures that we have to take. There's authority to keep the zero bail in place for an additional 90 days. Now, that's discretionary also. And so I have indicated that if we're able to get the basis for the justification of zero bail under control, and there are no longer any emergency orders, either as a result of our health or through the court system, that the zero bail should not be in place either. So that would be my argument. My caveat to that would be we always have to monitor the health of the community as it relates to our citizens, the people in the courtrooms, and inmates if we were to see a spike in the thing. But it is allowed to last for 3 months beyond when the emergency orders are lifted, which right now, as it relates to court, we think by the end of May. So if you do the math, you're talking about June, July. It could go all the way through the end of August. So
okay,
that's a good question, Ashley. I appreciate that.
Okay, and Anna, I see your question here. Give me a second here. Let me stay on topic because yours is slightly off, but we'll try to answer it. And so this came in from both the previous question and this question that I'm going to ask you came in from somebody. Now it's funny. Her name is Nunya. Her name's not funny. I was looking at her Instagram handle, but I want to give her a shout out and thank her for asking these questions on Instagram, and want to give her and her son a shout out. Congratulations. The son got accepted. He's going to be going to Sacramento State. So just a shout out to you, and good deal. Okay. So here's the next question. How will the district attorney's office handle workloads once the courts are fully reopened? And this is a topic of discussion today and yesterday.
What we're going to do is we've already indicated we've had 80% of our workforce telecommuting at home. We expect the courts to do a soft, gradual reopening beginning on May 29th, and specifically the week of June the 1st. There are a lot of cases that are in the backlog stage, and we're going to bring people back from telecommuting. We're going to have them in the office. The courts are going to concentrate on the things that are the highest priority, and that generally is felonies and people who are in custody. So we're dealing with those cases now. We will increase the number of cases that are heard every day to be able to work on that backlog, because people who are charged with felonies and people who there's a potential for them to be in custody for quite a long time, or who are currently in custody, those are simply the cases that we prioritize in the system, and that's the appropriate thing to do. So we will expand the number of courtrooms that hear those cases. Right now, we only have 4 courtrooms in the entire county that are hearing criminal cases. We hope to start expanding that at least by, I would say, 14 or 15 courts by June. So that'll help relieve some of that pressure in terms of sort of the workload. So every discipline in the justice system, whether it be the courts, our office, the defense bar, will increase their personnel to go into court and handle more of these cases, because the courtrooms are going to open and there's going to be more judges there to hear the cases. So that's how we're going to deal initially with the workload. We do think that that's probably going to take at a minimum a month to even get to the point where it kind of starts getting back to normal. But as we all know, with everything else related to COVID, it's a dynamic change. I mean, what we think today is going to work on Monday, we could do this again, and I could have a completely different answer. But we're going to try to devote more personnel at all levels to deal with these case backloads and increase the number of courts that are open so we can process these cases.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. We got a good question here, even though it's a little bit off topic, but I think it's important. And I think Anna, she deserves an answer. On a different note, what can we do to help an incarcerated loved one that is fighting for his freedom due to wrongful incarceration? Mr. Anderson, can we send you a request and
their
story for you to consider home incarceration? So how does that work, sir, when we have an issue like this?
Anytime you have an issue like that, Anna, the first, yes, we are always open to listen to an indication by somebody who feels like they may be wrongfully incarcerated. We do have a conviction review unit in our office that can be submitted to. Here's what I would say is that it's always best to reach out to your loved one's attorney who represented them in court, whether it be a private attorney, an appointed counsel, or the public defender, to reach out to them first and indicate that you may have something that you need to provide to them that you think is significant that may make a difference in terms of their status of being incarcerated. That's always the way to go. And the reason I say that is that those conversations will remain confidential in terms of information that you or your loved one may need to share with the attorney. Certainly the information that relates to the person who's incarcerated, it would remain confidential. And that's always the best way to start. If for some reason you feel like that is an avenue that is simply not available or is not working, I always tell people, reach out, send us something on our internet. We have a general internet site, DA Internet, that somebody can email something into. We do check that every day. And if you relate it to a specific person in a specific case, I guarantee you that it's something we will look at and we will consider. I can't guarantee you a result. I can't guarantee you any decision because I don't have any specifics in front of me. But what I can guarantee you is that we will look at it because we take each and every one of those types of claims serious, because there are certainly instances in society where if mistakes were made, we want to be able to cure those mistakes as quickly as possible if they legitimately exist. So reach out to the defense attorney first, somebody in a position to keep those conversations confidential, because that's in the best interest of your loved one or even yourself. And if you feel that that's fruitless, reach out to us, but you got to give us specifics. We have to know a name, a case number, and things like that, because obviously we deal with so many cases. The more specifics that you're able to provide, the quicker we can get information back to you. So that's a great question, and I'm glad she asked it.
Yeah, absolutely. And Anna, you can always send us a direct message here on any of our social media platforms. I'll get it. Might ask you a couple questions, and then I'll give you the right place to go to start working on that. Now, earlier today, when I was talking to the Mr. Anderson about doing this live stream, I said, hey, just so you know, there could be some questions that might be a little dicey, and he was all for it. And he said, hey, bring him on. Right. So Albert Nunez and Nicole Mathis. We'll start with Nicole's question. And I'm just laughing because this wasn't on the agenda, but isn't this something our governor was trying to put in place long before the virus was even a known issue?
Yeah, I think what Nicole's referencing is there's been a debate for about a year and a half in California about going to a no cash bail system. And Senate Bill 10 passed last year, which called for no more cash bail. And so what happened was that we were just simply going to go to an evaluation of not a money amount, but a determination of factors of whether somebody posed a risk to the public or whether they posed a flight risk or they were not going to come back to court. And so that actually passed. What happened was that there was a referendum, essentially the bail bonds industry and then people who were concerned about public safety got enough signatures to say, okay, on the ballot this November, we want to be able to challenge that, and that was successful. And so this fall, we're having essentially in November there'll be an election, and one of the specific items will be will no cash bail remain in California, or be it overturned? And so yes, so this mechanism of zero bail by the Judicial Council is sort of a quasi no cash bail approach, and in my opinion, a little bit of a test balloon. To see what people are going to think and how it's going to work before. And so I think I get what she's asking, and I think it's actually very it's very insightful that she would be thinking about that, because I think there's some truth into that's already been done already, but it was put on hold as a result of enough signatures in a referendum.
Yeah, and Albert Nunez, similar along the lines, he says, is the zero bail influenced politically?
I think it could be. In this instance, Albert, I would say it was not. I'm sure that there were people that were advising the Judicial Council on both sides of it, saying it was a good idea, it was a bad idea, we shouldn't keep people incarcerated. And then there's the other side, mainly law enforcement and prosecutors, who would say we always got to balance on the side of innocent victims and not put them at risk. The zero bail from the Judicial Council, I would say, in my experience, was primarily motivated by the concern of the virus, of getting into the jails and just spreading like wildfire because of the lack of social distancing. The irony is that many people who were in custody were already quarantined from most of the folks like us who had been exposed to it by people who were traveling to foreign countries. And so you generally don't have a lot of people who traveled to a foreign country then go into an incarcerated state and expose everybody. And so they were oftentimes inmates in a better position to be quarantined than we were. And so I don't want to say that this particular zero bail at this time was politically motivated. It might have some tinges of politics on it because of sort of our no cash bail in California and the referendum coming up. But in this instance, I can say that I think the judiciary was significantly concerned about the health of people, and this was another tool to combat it. And the happy ending of it is we're still allowed to be able to argue that we can deviate from that zero bail.
Okay. So Marianne Napolis and Nadine, similar. Basically, they're asking, hey, how do they, as members of the community, I'll put up her question here. Who do they voice their concern? Like, is there someone they can contact? I see a lot of this on social media. Hey, who do they voice their concern to about this issue?
Okay. So what I mean, Marianne, by the local judiciary, these are the judges that are in San Bernardino County. So when I talk about we work with the local judiciary, it is the individual judges in San Bernardino County that sit in the courtrooms and hear criminal cases. They have a presiding judge and assistant presiding judge, so we deal with them on a day-to-day basis. The local defense bar is either private attorneys, attorneys who are private who are appointed to represent defendants, or the public defender's office, who is an arm of the county, who is paid. They represent all indigent defendants in terms of it. In terms of who you would express concern to, the California Judicial Council, or the Judicial Council of California, refer to it as the JCC. They do have a website. They post their orders on there. You can always contact that website and then go further and contact somebody within their office if you have concerns about why it is they made these decisions in terms of zero bail, why some crimes were accepted from it, why some crimes weren't. You know, why didn't they consider auto theft and evading and child abuse and elder abuse? You can certainly make contact with the JCC and express those concerns. So hopefully that clears up your questions in terms of what I'm referencing. And I apologize if I sometimes use some terms that I'm so used to using that I forget, not everybody uses those terms every day. So that was a good question for clarification.
The next question I had, it was from Scott Winetke. Winetsky. Smart way to combat this thing. Are other county district attorneys handling the zero bail order in the same manner as we are?
Well, first of all, I'll say, hey, Scott, how are you? I know who this guy is. He's a phenomenal guy. I hope you and your family are staying healthy and safe. Say hi to everybody for me, and I appreciate the question. I appreciate you following us. Not every DA's office is handling bail in the same manner. Most of the DAs want to handle it the way we want to handle it. But again, because there's some discretion, that is also up to the judges. And if the judges aren't going to implement it by the way we're implementing it, then I think you see that in other jurisdictions where more people are actually getting released just because the assumption is it's zero bail and no one can do anything about it. We can't make an argument to deviate and go up. And if it goes up, the defense can't make an argument to make it go down. Of course, if it stays at zero, the defense would never make any argument anyway. So not every jurisdiction is handling it the way we are. Again, it goes back to, I think, the efforts of everybody involved in San Bernardino County, particularly the Sheriff's Department, our office, to say, hey, we need to be able to have some discretion here to keep people safe. Unfortunately, not every jurisdiction is able to handle it the way we are.
Yeah. The last question I've got, which I have on my notes here, and then also it looks like Mallory Lippert says, just to clarify, the DA does not plan to have a decrease in the workforce. And that was on question 7 here, as far as, hey, life inside of the DA's office for you as the leader or of the organization, the whole team. Let's kind of paint a picture for people what it's been like inside of our office, and the fact that we haven't wavered in our mission. I had to alter some things, but maybe you can explain.
Yeah, we've always had the amount of personnel in our office to be able to handle what we've had since the court closures in March 16th. So we went from having almost 50 criminal courts in San Bernardino County down to 4. And so we had the personnel to be able to handle the cases that were being processed through 4 courtrooms. What we also had to do was make sure that the people that we didn't have to have and we weren't going to rotate through at that time got home and were safe with their family. There'll never be a decrease in the amount of resource that we devote to our criminal justice through the DA's office. We will always have enough people. So to give you an example, we have approximately 220 attorneys in the office. Now, we have an office of 560 people. The attorneys make up 220. Our phenomenal clerical make up a significant amount. Our investigators make up a significant amount, and then our victim advocates. And so we had consistently 30 to 35 attorneys showing up every day. Out of 220, you can see that's a significant decrease, but we had the people we needed to cover those 4 courtrooms. Now that the courtrooms are expanding, we're bringing back in 2 weeks everybody else. So we'll be back at a full complement of the entire office and have 560 people back in the office. So there will not be a decrease. As the courts gradually move up, we will ramp up also, and we've sent out that notification. And I got to tell you that our folks primarily in most of the divisions have already started to come back on their own to 3/4 staff. So it's encouraging, and we're ready for the challenge. And so we will not ever decrease resources. We just will implement them at the right time when it's safest for our individual folks, for their health, and also the needs of the community to keep people safe.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I don't see any more questions, so let me go ahead and wrap this up, sir, and we'll say goodbye to everybody. So we'd like to thank you for watching this show, and if you have questions for us, please leave them here in the comments or send us a private message. Remember to share this show with your friends and family, and encourage others to follow our office. And our handle is at SB County DA on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And very shortly here, we're going to have a brand new website coming up that's going to provide a lot of information and resources for our great people in San Bernardino County. I'm Mike Byers with Jason Anderson, and together we hope you stay safe and secure.
Thanks, Mike.